think we're ready to call to order the study session. So I'll call to order the study session of April 22nd, 2025. Call for the roll call.
Mayor Scott Anderson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bobby Buckley.
I'm here.
Councilmember Chuck Bongiovanni.
I am here.
Councilmember Kenny Buckland.
Here.
Councilmember Jan Kaprowski. Here. Councilmember Monty Lyons.
Here.
And Councilmember Jim Torgerson. Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you. I have one item tonight on the study session. Is discussion of the fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget. Patrick, are you starting off?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, I'll kick it off tonight, and then I'll hand it off to Kelly Fost from there. Okay, I wanted to start with just a high-level overview of some of the significant differences for this year's budget from previous years, as well as some of the current conditions, economic and otherwise, that we're continuing to have to deal with in Gilbert, Arizona. I'll start with in fiscal 26, which is the budget that will be coming before you on May 20th for the preliminary adoption. We will have $14 million less in ongoing revenues to our general fund to work with from the loss of residential rental sales tax, which is approximately $9 million per fiscal year. And then the state shared income tax reduction was about another $5 million, excuse me, from the second phase of the implementation of the flat tax that the state legislature put in place several years back. We did raise our sales tax rates along with a few other to meet some critical quality of life infrastructure needs and projects that we have, and those are underway, as we are all aware. We continue to deal with some inflation and supply chain issues in this market that are not yet fully resolved. Some of those, there's anticipated concern about impacts from tariffs and further impacts on supply chains and costs that we'll have to continue to monitor as things develop. We continue to deal with wage inflation and market competition for FTEs, or employees, as they're commonly referred to, and an increased workload on staff and inability to fund all of the positions that we see necessary to maintain our service lines and service levels in this community because of the long loss of ongoing revenue to the general fund in the upcoming fiscal year. We've got growth to manage. The community is still building. We're 293,000 residents and still climbing. As we all know, we'll top out potentially somewhere around 330,000 people. So we have growth that we need to keep up with currently. We've also got aging infrastructure, which continues to put more pressure on our budget each year as that infrastructure ages. And then there is potential talk and projections of a recession on the horizon. That tends to vary week by week, it feels like, but we will continue to monitor that situation and revise and pivot as necessary to make sure we manage our finances appropriately for this community, and we'll bring things forward if there's going to be significant impacts to our service lines or service levels as a result of something along those lines. But in summary, fiscal 26 is a difficult budget year with available revenues moving forward. We believe they are going to continue to be exceedingly tight. I also wanted to talk and highlight a few differences, and some of this is in follow-up from our finance retreat. Revenue differences between our peer communities in this region in the town of Gilbert. One of those is the vehicle license tax. Every city of the major cities in the region, the ones that are listed there, they place those funds in their general fund. Gilbert places almost $14 million into our streets funds and used it to help maintain our street infrastructure. But that is a significant source of funding and a difference between Gilbert, Arizona, and those communities that you see listed on the screen here in the valley. Also, I wanted to highlight revenue differences, and so we're well aware of the rates, and we always look at rates and try to make sure that we are managing that to stay competitive within this region. But as important as rates, it's important to understand the revenue collected and the revenue available for use for our community into the general fund. So if we start with sales tax per capita, this is fiscal year 24 actual sales tax collections. You'll see Gilbert on the far left side of that chart. We have roughly $540 available per resident to spend in this community. And then it goes up from there. Mesa at $649, Peoria at $660, Chandler at $729, and going all the way up to Scottsdale at $1379 per resident available to spend. Then looking at general fund dollars per capita, and we're all aware the general fund covers police, it covers fire, it covers parks and recreation, IT, HR, the manager's office, all of those departments and divisions that are not rate supported in our enterprise funds. And all those sources of revenues that come in, and that could be state shared income taxes, fees for services, and whatnot. Excuse me. And if you look at the available dollars per general fund per capita, and this is fiscal year 25 budgeted amounts. We do not have the fiscal 24 actual numbers yet, so we're using fiscal 25 budgeted. Gilbert has roughly $1,000 per resident in general fund dollars per capita. Peoria is next at $1,182, then Mesa at $1,243, Chandler at $1,288, going all the way up to Glendale at $1,784. So when you look at available funds to spend on services through our general fund for those services that I listed, this is how much money Gilbert raises to spend on our community to maintain service lines, to maintain service quality in our community. And it's something that I think we should continue to have a discussion around as we continue to see these pressures and these cuts given to our budgets and ongoing revenue streams from the state legislature and from things that may happen in our economy. So with that, happy to answer any questions now or through Kelly's presentation, but I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to take it from here. We'll walk you through the rest of the budget at a high level. And then, of course, on May 20th, we'll bring forward the preliminary budget for your consideration and adoption at that time.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions for Patrick? No?
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you, Patrick, Mayor and Council. I gave Patrick all of the hard things, and now I get the fun stuff to talk to you about. Like Gilbert is best in class. We get a lot of accolades. Our community is known for a lot of its great services. A city for economic growth, best place for family, most affordable, most caring city. These are great things that Gilbert is known for. As always, we do our zero base. We do a third of the organization every year. And this year, as is the same with the last couple of years, because of the high inflation, we've actually had to add money to the budget for the different departments to continue to do the same services that they have been doing. It just costs more to provide those services. So in this case, $1.4 million had to be added to the various budgets just to keep them whole with the inflation and the cost escalation that we've seen. So since 2018, we've seen a $3 million savings over that period of time, and we'll continue to look at each of the departments, a third of the organization every year. Our budget process is a year-long process. As you're aware, we kick off in mid-September. We gather budget input, needs across the organization in September and November. Then our executive team meets for what we call the Hunger Games in January and February, where we look through each of the requests from the various departments and try and figure out a recommended balanced budget, knowing council's priorities, knowing the feedback that we get from citizens throughout the year through the various sources, and what the needs are coming up for the community. We have the financial retreat in March, where council gets to give direction on various financial topics that help inform the budget process. And town manager reviews the budget also in March, asks questions, makes changes, and then we bring the recommended budget to council in one-on-ones in April in this study session. Preliminary budget adoption is May, and final budget adoption is June. For the upcoming fiscal year, fiscal 2026, there was about $80 million of requested items across all of the funds in the town. There is not enough resources to do all of the things that are requested, even though there are a lot of really great business cases for these items. In order to balance ongoing revenues and expenditures in the various funds, it's recommended that we fund about $44 million total of those requested items. It's about just over half of what's been requested across the funds. If we break out that $44 million by the various areas, we can see general fund is the largest portion of that at $26 million. That general fund is one of our largest funds, so it makes sense that it is the largest amount. That includes about $7 million of FTE requests and about $4 million of overtime for PD, which are the largest pieces to that pie. Pretty much the rest of the pie and everything in the other funds is just keep the wheels on the bus. It costs more to do what we have been doing. And so we've had to add funding to those different areas just to keep the services going that we have traditionally provided. If we break this out a little bit more, that $26 million from general fund, we break it out by focus area. You can see that maintaining service level is our largest area of focus in the upcoming budget, and also life cycle replacement. There is about $2 million in new service level. That's mostly associated with the new FTEs for the Advocacy Center. Is pretty much the new item for next year's budget. In streets and enterprise funds, a very similar story. The investment is in maintaining service levels and some life cycle replacement. If we take that same data, the $44 million of recommended funding, and divide it out by our strategic initiatives, most of our investment is going into exceptional built environment and prosperous community. For the positions that are requested next year, we have both FTE, full-time employees, and LTA, a limited term agreement employees, which typically have a one-year contract and use one-time funding. In total, it's about 34 positions across the entire town, FTE positions, and about 18 LTA positions. In the general fund, all of the FTE positions that are being requested are in public safety, police, fire, or associated with the Advocacy Center. All of the other positions are recommended as LTA just to keep our ongoing funding balanced with our ongoing expenditures. Capital improvement continues to be our largest area of investment. The proposed budget contains about $1.7 billion of investment in capital improvement projects, most of them in the streets, water, and parks area. This next view, oops, there we go. Shows you how much is carry forward, so projects that we have approved in a prior year that we're continuing to work on. These are large projects. They take more than 1 year to complete. And then the middle column shows you we're looking to add about $500 million of additional funding or new funding onto those projects or with new projects. Most of that new funding is associated with water improvements, wastewater improvements, and then the park improvements. As you're aware, we budget the full CIP project amount up front. That allows us to issue the contracts, make sure that we have enough funding to complete all of the projects that we start, which is a very conservative way to budget, but it does make the number that we adopt in the budget a lot larger. We will not spend this money completely out next year, but we do need it to issue those contracts and to continue working on those projects that take several years to complete. If we compare fiscal 25, our current year budget, with the proposed fiscal 26 budget, you can see that it is very similar. A $2.3 billion budget last year. What's proposed is a $2.46 billion budget. About $116 million difference. Majority of that is in the CIP investment. A little bit of changes across the funding areas. You'll notice a decrease in debt service amount. That does assume that council gives instruction to pay off the university building debt. In the meeting later tonight, we will match the budget to whatever is proposed, depending on council direction tonight, but that's how it's set up right now. We've also included property tax information. This is based on the discussion from the options that were given to council at the financial retreat. So it includes the $34.8 million levy, which would maintain our tax rate at 98 cents per $100 of assessed value. The upcoming milestones. Today is our budget study session, which is the opportunity for council to provide any direction and to ask any questions publicly about the budget. May 20th will be preliminary budget adoption, which will set the cap, the total dollar amount maximum for the year. It is also the first reading of the CIP projects and the first public hearing for the property tax. Then on June 10th is final budget adoption, final adoption of the capital improvement budget projects, and the property tax final adoption on that levy. With that, I'm open for any questions.
Questions for Kelly? Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kelly. Quick question. Of the budget for last year, the actual budget, what did we end up spending percentage-wise?
Last year, I want to say it was about $750 million, but that would be for fiscal 24. We don't know yet what's happening current year.
Okay, so we end up budgeting a heck of a lot more than what we actually spend.
That's true. In Arizona, you're not allowed to increase your budget after it's started. And so if we get more money in the year, we can't recognize it. We have to make sure to leave room for that. Plus, with the CIP projects, we budget the full amount of the projects, but it's going to, we don't know how much of the project will be completed during the year.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Kaprowski.
Because we have a couple of new council members on the dais, I just wanted you to hit on that point again that you were talking about regarding the CIP project, because other municipalities do not have it reflected in their budget. Typically, if they have a CIP project and it goes for 5 years, they'll have a portion of that CIP project in their budget each year. And so with Gilbert putting the entire amount in the first year, it does make a big difference in what our budget looks like, and that's what Councilmember Bongiovanni just pointed out, in that our actual spending or like cash flow in a year is much different than what our budget looks like.
Yes.
Other questions? I have a question, Kelly. Could you explain a little bit more LTAs and FTEs and why it's kind of critical that we limit those LTAs, what kind of an impact that has on our operations?
Sure. An FTE is a full-time employee. They have an ongoing contract with the town for employment that does not have an end date, so it takes ongoing funding in order to issue those employment offers. With the LTAs, that's a limited term agreement, so we offer to employ the person for a specific period of time, usually about a year, that follows the budget process. That allows us to use one-time funding for that position. There's only certain positions that you can do that with. Not all positions get a great variety of candidates, but it's very important for us to be able to keep our ongoing expenditures and revenues balanced. If we don't have the ongoing expenditures, we can't offer ongoing positions to employees. So it provides a great service to the town, but it is difficult on the employees if you're trying to get a mortgage and don't have ongoing employment promised, that you may not be able to qualify to be able to purchase a home. So we have to use it judiciously. This budget is using a lot more LTAs than we traditionally use, just because of the difficulty with ongoing funding that we have this year.
Thank you. Councilmember Torgerson.
I would assume that difficulty with ongoing funding is the reduction of rental tax and the shared revenues.
That has definitely contributed to that, yes.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you. One, it appears that the increase in the overall budget, including all the CIPs, is a little under 5%. I'm assuming that's related mostly to construction on the CIPs, isn't it?
Not necessarily. There's a whole bunch of, there are new projects as well as additional funding onto existing projects. So it will be a mix of items there. Each project is thoughtfully looked at individually by the project managers for a budget. We don't just add a 5% inflation. So.
No, but I'm saying overall, the reason that you didn't add 5% inflation, but as costs were adjusted, the realistic end of a project, that number shifts, and that would appear, when I looked at it, to be mostly responsible for the increase in the overall budget.
It might be happenstance. Some of the projects already have guaranteed GMPs, so the price is set. They wouldn't have any inflation on those types of projects. Other projects have had cost escalation and had to add it, and then there are some new. So it's a mix of things that are causing that increase.
Okay, and then when you and I discussed property tax, we were talking about initially, like last year and the year before, there was much higher inflation rate. And we talked about the difference of, was it worth paying early because the value of the dollar was dropping? But it appears now that the value of the dollar is right in that same mix. So there is there or is there not any savings by either prepaying or underpaying property tax, or are we right in that sweet spot?
For property tax, it repays debt, only secondary property tax debt that's on a ballot. That debt, those general obligation bonds have a specific structure where we repay them. It's not like your mortgage where you can repay extra whenever you want. There are certain windows of time that we can refinance, or after it's callable, then we can do that. That's only usually after the debt's 10 years old. So we have to do some long-term planning at targeting a rate. We do have a little bit of flexibility to be able to do, by town policy, up to 5% reserves, by state policy, less than 10%. So we can manage the tax rate a little bit within that window. But we need direction from council on long-term when we issue new debt, kind of what tax rate long-term to
Right, I
target.
understand that, but I'm saying when we talked about, there were several options on the table. It was lowering it a point or two, keeping it the same, raising it a few points. But it appeared by looking at the current inflation rate, it wasn't worth reducing it because there was no benefit there. Right now, it seemed that that inflation rate was almost commensurate with what we were paying. So why lower it right now would be the question. We had a long discussion about this, so maybe I'm being unclear in what I'm asking. But I had looked at a minor savings, but it seemed like that savings in the long run would cost us more money because of the way it's set up inflation-wise.
Ah, got you. Not so much tied with inflation, but with the interest that we would have to pay in structuring the next round of bonds. So we have 515 million of GO bonds that are approved by voters for transportation. We've only issued 200 million of that. So we do have the next issuance coming up. If we target a lower rate over the course of that issuance, it does cost either 10 million or, 3.5 million, depending on how much lower we want to go. So less associated with inflation, more associated with the interest that has to be paid on how we structure that next round of bonds.
Got it. And one other thing is I saw, it seemed unusual to me, in some of the capital purchases, why are we buying an F-150 Lightning instead of just an F-150?
I would have to defer to the department or fleet on that. Don't know that off the top of my head.
Because it just seems unnecessary. I mean, it's a small thing, but I noticed it. Is there anybody here that can address that, or is that a question for later?
Mayor, Councilman Torgan, yeah, why don't we follow up with you between now and May 20th when prelim adoption would be?
I'd appreciate it.
Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Kelly, let's say my secondary property tax is $10,000 a year. How much of that actually goes to Gilbert?
About 10% of the total property tax bill comes to Gilbert. The rest goes to the county, the school districts, and the special service districts.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? It's a quiet crowd.
I did a lot of reading. I don't need to talk a lot.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, I think we're done with the study session. So let's adjourn the study session.
Mayor, excuse me, could we do a motion? That's what the rules now require.
Oh, I didn't know with the study session if it did or not.
Yeah, we typically follow the general
I get
rules,
a
so.
motion,
So moved.
moved by Councilmember Bongiovanni, seconded by Vice Mayor. All in favor, please
Aye.
say aye. Aye.